We're going to start our lessons on statistics by covering some vocabulary. The vocabulary is very important for statistics because it helps us determine oftentimes the method of how we're going to gather data and information. So when we look at these, we want to make sure we can make distinctions between different vocabulary pieces. So, statistical question is a question that can be answered by collecting many data points. So an example of that would be if we wanted to say, what is the average height of sophomores at the school? Now, that information, we don't have just an answer. We'd have to go ahead and find information from several different data points. If something has just one answer, like if we wanted to know what is the favorite restaurant of a certain person, there's only one answer to that. And so that would not be a statistical question. But if we wanted to find out what's the favorite restaurant of many people in a certain group, say at a church or at a school, then that would be a statistical question. Now, a statistical variable is a quantity or quality that can be measured or counted. So for this, we want to have two of our variable types are going to be a categorical variable This is where you get an attribute as an answer. As an example, a nice easy one for if we were talking about people would be their eye color. That would be an attribute, not a number. Whereas the other one is quantitative variable. And this is a number. So if we're still talking about a person, we could maybe ask what their height is, which can be categorized by a number. So when you're asking for the attribute, that's categorical. If you're asking for a number, that's quantitative. All right, so let's talk about population versus sample. These two are related to each other, and what can be confusing is sometimes you can make a population into a sample or a sample into a population. You just have to know how it relates to the initial statistical question. So the population is the group of all members. So if I'm asking that question, for instance, if I am asking about all sophomores at a certain school, that would be the population would be all the sophomores together. So it's everyone or everything if we're talking about a different thing than a person. So everyone or everything in the group. Now from that group, we might find out the information for everybody and find out that information for the population is fine, but maybe we want to go to a smaller group of that population and just find out the information from them and then use that to make some assumptions about what the whole population would be. So a smaller set, a sample is a smaller set of the members of a population. So notice that smaller set, you want to reduce it down to find out what the sample is. All right, so these two, the next two, parameter and statistic, relate to these two. Population goes with parameter, sample goes with statistic. Okay, so in essence, the parameter is some piece of data that I discover about the entire population, whereas a statistic is some piece of data I find about just the small sample that I take. All right, so the parameter it describes, it's a measure that describes the whole population. As an example, if I'm talking about the sophomores at a school, I might use as my example the average height of sophomores at a school. Now notice that in this case, the way that's phrased, all the sophomores at the school are the population. Now I could make that population a sample if I was using that to find out information about sophomores across the nation. So that's why I'm saying that populations can become samples and vice versa. We just have to know what the question is. So here, the whole population that I'm dealing with is the sophomores at a school. So when I take then a sample of that, find out the information like the average height of the sample of students, a smaller group of that population, that's called a statistic. So the statistic goes with the sample, parameter goes with the population. So a statistic is a measure that predicts the parameter by using a sample. Right, so an example here would be is if I wanted to take the average height of a certain group of students in math class during a certain period. So example would be average height of sophomores in 6th period math. So I'd go to every 6th period math class, find the sophomores, find their height, and take the average. That might be a good prediction of all the sophomores at the school. The next three are pretty familiar ones. I think we've used mean, median, and mode in many math classes before. So mean is the average, where you just add everything together and divide by the number of data points. The median is the middle. Now this one is tricky because you want to line everything up in order. So first of all, line the data up in order. And find the middle number. Now that's all well and good if we've got an odd number of data points because you just go with the middle number is actually a number, but what if there's an even number of data points? There's not a middle number. So if there's an even number of data points, you just average the middle two. If there is an even number of data points, average the middle two. All right, and then the mode is the most. So when you look at the data, if you count how many of each number there is, or each category there is, if you count them up, the one that has the most is the mode. Now mode, you don't average it. If there's 2 modes, you just list both modes. If there's 3 modes, you list all 3. So mode is the most. Now let's talk about, finishing this off by talking about some of how we actually gather the data. So let's talk about how we do a study. So if we're going to do a statistical study, there are three types of studies that we're going to talk about. The first one is that we're going to do a sample survey. This is where you take a sample and ask everyone in the sample the same question. I'm going to put questions because you could ask several questions, just one or multiple questions. But you have to ask the same questions. If you ask different questions, it's not really a valid survey. Okay, an experiment, we're used to doing experiments in, say, science class. What you do is you apply a treatment, and you put treatment in quotes, and gather results. Now, for instance, a treatment might be it might be a medical experiment. So you would apply the medicine to a group, see if it has an effect or not. It could also be, for instance, a treatment might be some type of additive for tires that make them hold up under heat longer. And so that would be something that you'd add to tires, see if they hold up longer. So treatment is whatever you're adding to the whatever the statistical question is, what you're adding to it, and then gather the results to see if it has the effect that you're looking for. And then observational study, this is where you watch and observe and gather data. So this is usually where you don't apply any kind of treatment, you just watch, see what's happening, gather the data, and make your conclusions from that. All right, now this is a very important word in statistics, bias. We're trying to avoid bias in the work we do. Oftentimes statistics can be used in the wrong way because people use and they bias their answers to come out with a specific type of answer. A study has bias if it systemically misrepresents a population. So if we're changing the data so that it will misrepresent what should happen with the population, that's bias. A random sample is when each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So we want to randomize as much as possible because, again, we can introduce misinformation if we just take our sample from something that's very convenient or something that doesn't show the whole population, doesn't make it random, then our data might be skewed in one direction or the other. All right, lastly, these two are already filled out. Experimental group is when you apply a treatment and it receives the treatment, that's the experimental group. And the control group is when you don't apply that treatment to it, and then you compare the two to see if there's a difference between them. So this is some introductory vocabulary for statistics. We want to be able to determine what kind of study we're going to do and how we properly do that study so that we don't misrepresent the data. So this will help us speak the language of statistics in order to get the results that are appropriately applied to the data.